They fired me from the empire I built, thinking they'd won, but they forgot one crucial detail. They only took my keys, not my arsenal. The moment the mahogany door slammed shut, the real war for Sterling and Finch began. The mahogany door slammed shut behind me, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the marble foyer of Sterling and Finch. I gripped the strap of my briefcase so tightly my knuckles were white, the cool leather doing nothing to quell the inferno raging inside my chest. 7 years. 7 years I poured every ounce of my being into this institution, transforming it from a sleepy regional lender into a powerhouse on the global stage. And for what? To be escorted out like a common thief? My lifetime achievement dismantled in a hastily called, whispered-about emergency board meeting this morning. Effective immediately, Ms. Davies. The board has voted to accept your resignation. That was Richard Thorne, chairman of the board, his voice dripping with false sympathy. He looked smug, Julian Vance, the vulture who'd been circling my corner office for the past 2 years, standing right behind him, adjusting his bespoke tie. They thought they had won. They thought they had neutralized the threat. A black woman who dared to climb higher than they were comfortable with, who dared to demand transparency where they preferred shadows. I didn't dignify them with a word. My security detail, men I'd personally vetted and promoted, looked away. Shame etched on their faces, powerless against the directive handed down by the majority shareholders. I walked through the silent atrium, the plaques bearing my name on the foundation walls, blurring through the sudden stinging tears I refused to let fall. They took my keycard. They took my laptop. They stripped me down to the expensive suit I was wearing, and the phone still in my pocket. A personal device, one they hadn't thought to confiscate because they underestimated me at every turn. I reached the street curb, the city noise a dull roar. For a moment I considered the rage, the urge to scream, to burn the building down with my bare hands. But rage is fleeting, strategy is eternal. My driver, Marcus, was waiting a block away, precisely where I'd told him to wait if this went sideways. He didn't ask questions. He just opened the rear door of the black SUV. As I slid into the leather seat, the city lights streaming past the tinted windows, I finally allowed myself a single shaky breath. "Where to, Ms. Davies?" Marcus asked quietly, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. He knew. Marcus knew everything about my schedule, my worries, my enemies. "The office of O'Malley and Reed," I told him, my voice surprisingly steady, carrying a steel edge I hadn't known I possessed this morning. O'Malley and Reed, the best legal minds in the country, specializing in corporate warfare and hostile takeovers. I had retained them years ago, quietly, setting up a massive retainer that would trigger upon termination without cause. They were waiting for my call. The drive across town was surreal. I watched Sterling and Finch recede in the distance, my creation, my fortress, now occupied by the very people who wanted to see it fail. Vance and Thorne had convinced the old guard that my recent aggressive acquisition strategy was too risky, citing governance concerns and potential regulatory exposure. Lies. All of it. The truth was simpler. I was too successful, too independent, and the dividends I demanded they reinvest in community development didn't line their offshore pockets quickly enough. I pulled out the burner phone I kept specifically for emergencies, the one they didn't know existed. I didn't dial O'Malley. I had already sent a coded text 20 minutes before the board meeting even convened. "The Eagle is grounded. Prepare the nest." As the SUV merged onto the expressway, the burner buzzed immediately. A single message from Sarah O'Malley. "The team is assembled. What are the coordinates?" I leaned forward, staring intensely at the phone screen, crafting a message that would change the entire game. "Marcus, pull over here. I need to make one more call before we get to O'Malley's." He eased the car onto the shoulder near a quiet, dimly lit park entrance. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 3 years, a number associated with privilege and immense, untraceable influence. It rang 3 times. "Yes?" The voice on the other end was gravelly, accustomed to command. It was Senator Blackwood, the man who held the regulatory reins for half the financial sector in D.C. "Senator, it's Eleanor Davies. I was just illegally removed from my position at Sterling and Finch. They acted without due process, alleging governance irregularities. I need you to understand something very clearly. This isn't just about me losing a job. This is about them systematically hiding the paper trail leading directly to the Cayman accounts of 3 sitting board members." There was a long, deadly silence on the line. I could almost hear the senator calculating the political fallout. "Eleanor, that's a serious accusation, one that requires tangible proof," he finally managed. "Oh, Senator, that's the beautiful part," I whispered, looking back towards the skyline where Sterling and Finch sat like a mocking monument. "The proof isn't on the main servers they seized. It's encrypted on a private cloud server I personally maintain, synced nightly to a remote access terminal at my private residence. And I have the access codes ready for your enforcement team to deploy the moment O'Malley files the injunction." I hung up before he could respond. I felt a dangerous surge of pure adrenaline. They had taken my title, but they hadn't taken my data. They hadn't taken my leverage. "Okay, Marcus," I said, turning back to my driver, my lips curving into a slow, predatory smile that felt entirely unfamiliar, yet perfectly natural. "Let's go bankrupt a few old men." We sped toward the O'Malley and Reed Tower, the city lights now seeming to pulse with anticipation. Just as Marcus signaled to change lanes, my personal cell phone, the one they thought was my only means of communication, lit up with an incoming text. It wasn't Sarah O'Malley. It was an unknown number. The message was a single photograph. It was a picture of my apartment living room. The front door was slightly ajar, and standing in the middle of my pristine, empty living room, looking directly at the hidden camera I'd installed months ago behind the antique clock, was Julian Vance. Underneath the photo, a chilling caption read, "We checked your hard drive first, Eleanor. Game over." The world narrowed instantly to the glare of the phone screen. The sickening lurch in my stomach wasn't just fear. It was the cold, sharp realization of how thoroughly I had been outmaneuvered in the tactical phase. They hadn't just escorted me out. They had orchestrated a simultaneous surgical strike against my personal infrastructure. Vance wasn't just smug. He was connected deeper than I ever suspected, bypassing firewalls I'd believed impenetrable. "Marcus, emergency override. North Tower parking garage, level P4, now," I barked, throwing the phone onto the console between us. The SUV shrieked as Marcus executed the hard brake and swerved into the cramped space, tires protesting violently against the concrete. I yanked open the door, ignoring the frantic beep of the proximity sensor. Vance hadn't just photographed the room. He'd sent the image to me in transit, knowing the panic it would induce, hoping to derail the legal blitzkrieg O'Malley was preparing. "Stay here, Marcus. If anyone follows me, you take the secondary route I showed you. Do not engage." I sprinted toward the emergency stairwell. The distance to my penthouse felt like a marathon run in quicksand. My mind, trained for crisis management over 2 decades, was cycling through contingencies at warp speed. The private cloud server was the primary target, the nuclear option. But if Vance was already in my apartment, he wasn't just looking for evidence. He was looking for the hardware housing the decryption keys, or perhaps the physical backup drive itself. I bypassed the lobby security, knowing the internal cameras would be locked down by now. Or worse, already wiped clean by Vance's cronies. I hit the elevator button for my floor, 32, but knew it was futile. It would be remotely disabled, or more likely, already occupied by Vance's extraction team. The stairwell was my only path. The pounding of my expensive leather pumps against the concrete steps became a relentless drumbeat accompanying my own ragged breaths. 32 flights. I had to reach that apartment before Vance's muscle found the hidden safe behind the Rothko print. When I finally burst onto the 32nd floor landing, heart hammering against my ribs, the hallway was silent. Too silent. The thick Persian runner muffled any sound. I moved down the corridor toward my door, pulling the small flat object from the inner pocket of my blazer. A slim, magnetized, lock-picking device I'd originally bought as a curiosity, but which had proven invaluable during a particularly disastrous site inspection in Monaco years ago. I slid the device into the high-security strike plate. A faint click echoed in the quiet hall. I pushed the door open an inch. No alarm. Good. That meant they were inside, and they hadn't tripped any internal motion sensors, which meant they were moving slowly, methodically. I slipped inside, pressing my back against the cool marble of the entryway. The apartment was exactly as the photo showed. My expensive minimalist decor undisturbed, bathed in the eerie blue glow of the city night filtering through the panoramic windows. And then I saw him. Julian Vance. He wasn't in the living room. He was standing in the doorway of my study, bathed in the harsh white light of the opened safe. He was holding a small metallic drive, the physical drive containing the initial, irrefutable evidence linking him and the other two directors to massive securities fraud. The drive I was supposed to use to launch O'Malley's injunction in 2 hours. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked triumphant. "Hello again, Eleanor," Vance purred, holding the drive up between his thumb and forefinger like a trophy. "Did you really think I wouldn't trace your little celebratory text to O'Malley and Reed? Amateur hour?" I moved, not toward him, but toward the heavy Venetian glass sculpture sitting on the console table beside me. I grabbed it, the weight surprisingly solid in my hand, and launched it across the room. Vance, despite his years of board meetings and golf courses, reacted instantly, ducking behind the thick granite desk. The sculpture exploded against the wall behind him in a shower of glittering shards. "That was unwise, Eleanor," he called out from behind cover. "There are 3 men clearing out your files right now. You have lost the advantage. The injunction means nothing if the evidence disappears before your counsel even prints the filing." He was right. The drive in his hand was the key. I lunged for the study door, but before I could reach the frame, a heavy boot swung out from under the desk, catching me squarely behind the knee. I crumpled, crying out as the impact shot a blinding pain up my leg. As I fell, Vance emerged, tossing the drive carelessly in the air and catching it once, mockingly. He stepped over me, walking toward the balcony doors. "I'm taking this drive directly to the SEC headquarters downtown. By the time you crawl out of here, Eleanor, you'll be facing countercharges for corporate espionage and illegal data hoarding. Say goodbye to your freedom." He reached for the heavy glass handle of the balcony door, ready to make his escape across the adjacent rooftop. A contingency I had built in, thinking I was the only one who knew about that secondary access point. But as Vance's fingers closed around the handle, the lights in the study abruptly cut out. Total darkness enveloped the room, broken only by the distant, shimmering lights of the city outside. And then, from the hallway I had just sprinted down, came a sound that froze the blood in my veins. Not the sound of Vance's thugs, but the distinct metallic snick of a firearm being cocked, followed by a low, steady voice that was neither mine nor Vance's. "Nobody leaves, Mr. Vance, especially not with evidence that belongs to my client." The sudden blackness was a calculated maneuver, but the voice that followed it was the true masterstroke. It wasn't the local precinct. It wasn't the FBI team Senator Blackwood might have dispatched. It was the voice of David Chen, the head of security operations for O'Malley and Reed, a man who specialized in making problems disappear, or reappear, depending on the contractual obligation. He wasn't just a lawyer's advisor. He was a ghost contractor for hire. "Who the hell are you?" Vance shrieked from the direction of the balcony, his triumphant swagger evaporating instantly. The sound of the cocking gun was replaced by the muffled sound of scuffling. Vance had evidently tried to bolt for the terrace, only to find Chen's operational team had anticipated the move and cut off the escape route seconds before I even entered the apartment. I gritted my teeth against the throbbing in my knee, pushing myself up against the cold granite of the desk. "That, Julian," I managed, my voice raspy, "is the sound of losing." The emergency backup lights, subtle LED strips embedded in the floorboards, flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows across the study. The scene was chaos under control. 2 enormous figures in tactical black were pinning Vance against the glass doors, one of them expertly wrenching the stolen data drive from his limp fingers. Chen himself stood near the entrance, impeccably dressed even amidst the sudden violence, holding a suppressed sidearm aimed squarely at Vance's chest. "The hard drive is secure, Eleanor," Chen confirmed, nodding briefly to me, "and we secured the individuals attempting to scrub your primary cloud backup as well. They never got past the access credentials." Relief, potent and dizzying, washed over me, almost making me pass out from the sudden drop in adrenaline. They hadn't just secured the data, they had neutralized Vance's internal cleanup crew before they could execute their most critical task. The senator's leverage was now my own, solidified by Chen's tactical intervention. Vance struggled weakly under the grip of the two men. "You can't do this. I have friends in high places. The board will bury you all." I slowly pushed myself to my feet, leaning heavily on the desk for support, and limped toward the center of the room. I looked down at Vance, not with anger, but with a cold, profound pity for a man who mistook malice for strategy. "You confuse friends with accomplices, Julian. Your friends in high places, the ones whose names are on those Cayman ledgers I sent to Senator Blackwood. They are very busy right now, avoiding subpoenas. When you betrayed me, you didn't just take down a CEO. You exposed a systemic rot that DC needs to be seen cleaning up. And I'm going to make damn sure they clean it all the way down to the foundation." I gestured to Chen, who signaled his team to secure Vance and the others. "Take them. Charge them with corporate sabotage, breaking and entering, and attempted theft of proprietary assets. Use every local ordinance and federal statute available. I want them processed by dawn. And Chen," I added, pausing him as he turned to leave, "ensure the press gets a detailed release about why they were arrested. Focus on the attempted destruction of evidence related to regulatory non-compliance." Chen gave a curt, professional salute. "Consider it done, Ms. Davies. By the time the market opens, Sterling and Finch will be undergoing an involuntary federal audit, and the narrative will already be written." As the heavy footsteps retreated down the hall, taking my tormentors away, I finally allowed myself to sink onto the plush rug. My knee screamed, but the pain was distant. I reached for the burner phone again, checking the time. 2:17 a.m., just enough time to get to O'Malley's office. I didn't call Marcus. I called Sarah O'Malley directly. "It's done, Sarah. The evidence is secure, the conspirators are detained, and Blackwood has the ledger. Tell the morning briefers to focus on restoring shareholder confidence through aggressive regulatory cooperation. We aren't just suing them for wrongful termination. We're taking control of the bank from the receivership. Immediately." There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end, then a burst of triumphant laughter. "Eleanor, you glorious menace. You were never ousted. You just executed a hostile, preemptive acquisition of your own hostile takeover attempt." I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the cool stone of the desk base. The fire in my chest hadn't been extinguished. It had simply been channeled into a controlled burn that had just vaporized my opposition. "Tell the board," I said, finally feeling the exhaustion crash over me, "that they can send my old keycard back. I won't need it. I'm just changing the locks." I hung up. In the